Jules Bianchi's fatal accident began with a basic error. October 5, 2014 at Suzuka in Japan, heavy rain made the race dangerous. Adrian Sutil crashed his Sauber at turn 7, and a recovery crane was sent to clear the car. Normally, this would be routine, but this time, cars were still racing at full speed. Bianchi came through the same corner in his Marussia, lost control on the wet surface and hydroplaned at 126 miles per hour, straight into the recovery crane. The crane weighed 6.5 tons. The impact measured 92 G, similar to hitting a concrete wall at high speed. The crash cracked Bianchi's helmet and caused a diffuse axonal injury, a type of brain damage from sudden deceleration. He was airlifted to a hospital in Japan, then moved to France, where he spent 9 months in a coma before he died. Teams had been asking race control to stop the session. 20 minutes before Bianchi's crash, drivers reported the dangerous conditions and called for a red flag to pause the race until the weather improved. Race control did not act. The FIA later blamed Bianchi, saying he was driving too fast for the conditions. Data showed he had slowed down under double yellow flags, but not enough. His family sued for negligence, noting the recovery vehicle was the only unprotected object on the track. F1 retired his number 17 forever and introduced the Halo device, which has since saved multiple lives. But in 2022, another recovery vehicle appeared on track at the same corner during wet conditions. Pierre Gasly missed it by inches and screamed over the radio, "We lost Jules already. How is this possible?" Michael Schumacher's disappearance. Michael Schumacher was skiing with his son Mick in the French Alps on December 29, 2013. They were on a familiar slope between two marked runs when Schumacher hit a hidden rock. He was wearing a helmet, but the impact cracked it and caused severe brain trauma. Doctors in Grenoble performed emergency surgery to remove blood clots, but the damage was extensive. Schumacher was placed in a medically induced coma for 6 months. When he woke up, his family made a decision that would puzzle the world for the next decade. They built a wall of silence around him. No photos, no medical updates, no interviews. His wife Karina moved him to their home in Switzerland and hired a team of nurses and doctors to provide round-the-clock care. The estimated cost is over $50,000 per week. Only a select few are allowed to visit. Jean Tott, his former Ferrari boss, sees him regularly but gives cryptic updates. He says things like, "Michael is fighting," and "he's different but still there." Nobody knows what that actually means. German tabloids have offered millions for a single photograph of Schumacher. Paparazzi have used helicopters to fly over his compound. Someone broke into his medical records and tried to sell them to newspapers. The family has sued everyone and won every case. The mystery has spawned countless rumors. Some claim he's paralyzed. Others say he's brain dead. In 2021, Netflix created a documentary that used artificial intelligence to fake an interview with Schumacher. His family sued them too. His son Mick joined F1. Reporters constantly asked if his father watched the races. The answer was always the same: that's private. 10 years after the accident, the most famous driver in F1 history remains largely unknown to the world. Singapore Grand Prix race fix. 2008 Singapore Grand Prix was the first night race in Formula One history, and it was widely criticized for being rigged. Renault's team principal, Flavio Briatore, had a problem. Fernando Alonso was starting 15th on the grid with no realistic chance of scoring points. The team needed a miracle to salvage anything from the weekend, so Briatore and his engineering director, Pat Simons, came up with a plan. They would have Nelson Piquet Jr., Alonso's teammate, crash his car at exactly the right moment to trigger a safety car. This would bunch up the field and allow Alonso to gain positions when everyone else pitted for fuel. On lap 14, Piquet drove his car straight into the concrete barrier at turn 17. He made it look like a driving mistake, but he had practiced the crash during testing sessions. The safety car was deployed immediately, and Alonso suddenly found himself leading the race after everyone else made their pit stops. The plan worked. Alonso won the race from 15th on the grid. Renault celebrated, the media praised Alonso, and no one suspected anything. The truth only came out a year later when Renault fired Piquet Jr. for poor performance. He was furious and decided to expose the conspiracy. He had recorded conversations with Briatore in which they discussed the plan. He had emails about the timing of the crash. He had phone records showing when they decided to implement the strategy. The FIA investigation found that Briatore and Simons had orchestrated the entire scheme. They were banned from F1, though Briatore later had his lifetime ban reduced to 5 years. Renault received a suspended sentence, which meant they could keep racing as long as they didn't cheat again. Alonso kept his win and said he knew nothing about the plan. Piquet Jr.'s career ended. No team would hire the driver who exposed the scandal. He was left out of the sport. McLaren's industrial espionage. In 2007, a disgruntled Ferrari engineer named Nigel Stepney decided to get revenge on his employers. He had been passed over for a promotion and was angry about the treatment he received. So he photocopied 780 pages of Ferrari's most sensitive technical documents and handed them to McLaren. The stolen information included everything: wind tunnel data, suspension settings, tire pressure recommendations, fuel consumption figures, and aerodynamic specifications. It was Ferrari's complete technical blueprint, worth millions of dollars in research and development. McLaren's chief designer, Mike Coughlin, used the documents to improve their car. They copied Ferrari's exhaust layout, changed their suspension, and adjusted their aerodynamics using Ferrari's data. They used Ferrari's research to compete against them. When the FIA investigated, McLaren lied about the extent of their knowledge. They claimed Coughlin had received just a few pages of general information that hadn't been used in their car development. Investigators found emails between McLaren engineers discussing specific Ferrari secrets in detail. One email discussed Ferrari's exact fuel consumption rates for various circuits. Another discussed their tire heating procedures for qualifying. A third referenced their precise car setup for the Monaco Grand Prix. McLaren had been systematically stealing Ferrari's competitive advantages for months. The FIA imposed the largest fine in sports history, $100 million. McLaren was also excluded from the Constructors' Championship, resulting in additional millions in lost prize money and television revenue. Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso were allowed to retain their driver's points, but the team lost all its points. Nigel Stepney was fired by Ferrari and banned from F1 for life. Mike Coughlin got a 2-year suspension and left McLaren. The case showed that industrial espionage was common in F1, but McLaren was caught doing it openly. Roland Ratzenberger's forgotten death. Roland Ratzenberger died 24 hours before Ayrton Senna, but hardly anyone remembers him. On April 30th, 1994, during qualifying for the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola, Ratzenberger was pushing his Simtek to the limit when disaster struck. His front wing had been damaged earlier in the session after he hit a curb, but the team sent him back out without making the necessary repairs. The wing was only held together with tape and zip ties. At Villeneuve Corner, the makeshift repair failed completely. The front wing collapsed, removing all aerodynamic downforce from the front of the car. Ratzenberger's Simtek became a missile heading straight for the concrete barrier at 195 miles per hour. There was nothing he could do to avoid the impact. The crash killed him instantly. His neck was broken and his skull was fractured. He was 33 years old and had been racing in F1 for exactly 3 events. His car number was 34, and he had qualified for every race he had entered. Team owner Nick Wirth found Ratzenberger's unused return airline ticket in his jacket pocket after the crash. It was dated for Sunday evening after the race. Ratzenberger had been planning to fly home to Austria with his girlfriend after what should have been his 4th Grand Prix. When Ayrton Senna died the next day in a similar crash, Ratzenberger was overlooked. There was no minute's silence, no special tribute, and no retired number. The sport moved on. Both crashes were caused by similar aerodynamic failures, but only Senna's death led to major safety changes. Ratzenberger's death was seen as part of the risks of racing, while Senna's led to reforms. Gilles Villeneuve and the ultimate betrayal. The 1982 San Marino Grand Prix should have been a routine Ferrari 1-2 finish. Gilles Villeneuve was leading with his teammate Didier Pironi in 2nd place. With 12 laps to go, team manager Mauro Forghieri showed them a pit board with "slow" written on it. This was Ferrari's code for maintaining positions. Villeneuve immediately backed off, expecting Pironi to do the same. But Pironi had other plans. He caught up to his teammate and passed him on the main straight. Villeneuve was confused but thought it was just for show, to give the crowd some excitement before they settled back into formation. Villeneuve passed Pironi again, then Pironi passed him back. For the last 10 laps, they raced each other and ignored team orders. Pironi won the race. In the garage afterward, Villeneuve was livid. He felt betrayed by his teammate and embarrassed in front of the team. He told reporters, "Pironi has tricked me. I will never speak to him again as long as I live." 2 weeks later, at Zolder in Belgium, Villeneuve was still angry. He was determined to beat Pironi's qualifying time to prove who the faster driver was. On his final qualifying lap, he caught up to Jochen Mass's slower March car on the back straight. Villeneuve moved left to pass, but Mass also moved slightly left to give him room. The Ferrari's front wheel hit the March's rear wheel, and Villeneuve's car was launched into the air like a rocket. It flew 20 feet high and traveled another 50 yards before hitting the ground, nose first. Villeneuve was thrown from the car and landed in the catch fencing. His neck was broken and he died instantly. He was 32 years old. Pironi was devastated. Fans booed him at every race for the rest of the season. During practice for the German Grand Prix, his own car crashed in wet conditions and his legs were crushed. His F1 career was over. In 1987, Pironi died in a powerboat accident when his boat flipped over. Both Ferrari drivers from the 1982 race died within 5 years. Nelson Piquet's bathroom strategy. Three-time world champion Nelson Piquet Sr. had an unusual approach to race preparation. He regularly urinated in his car during races because stopping for bathroom breaks would cost too much time. The heat from the engine and cockpit would quickly evaporate the urine. It created a mystery for his Brabham mechanics. After races, they would find puddles of unidentified fluid around Piquet's cockpit area. It didn't smell like coolant, oil, brake fluid, or any other automotive liquid. They spent months trying to track down the source of these leaks. Finally, Piquet confessed to the practice. He explained, "When you're racing for 2 hours in 120-degree heat, would you really stop for a toilet break?" The mechanics were disgusted but had to admit the logic was sound. A pit stop for personal needs could cost 15 to 20 seconds, which was often the difference between winning and losing. Other drivers adopted similar strategies once word spread through the paddock. Some wore adult diapers under their racing suits. Others trained their bladders to hold larger volumes before races. A few drivers deliberately dehydrated themselves to minimize the problem, which led to different health issues. The practice demonstrated the physical demands of F1 racing. Drivers were willing to do whatever it took for an advantage. Modern cars have better ventilation and shorter races, but some still use Piquet's method in long events like Monaco. Nikita Mazepin's controversial career. Nikita Mazepin's path to F1 was paved with his father's money. Dmitry Mazepin, a Russian oligarch with close ties to Vladimir Putin, purchased a seat for his son at Haas for the 2021 season. The deal was worth approximately $30 million, which was more than Haas's entire budget from other sponsors. Before the season even started, Mazepin created a scandal. A video appeared on social media showing him groping a woman in the back seat of a car. The woman appeared uncomfortable and tried to push his hand away, but Mazepin persisted. He had posted the video himself on his Instagram story before quickly deleting it. Screenshots of the video spread across the internet within minutes. The hashtag #WeSayNoToMazepin trended globally. Fans created petitions demanding his removal from F1. Female journalists wrote articles about the culture of harassment in motorsports. Haas received thousands of complaints. Team principal Gunther Steiner issued a vague statement saying the matter had been handled internally and that Mazepin would face unspecified consequences. No public punishment was ever announced. Mazepin kept his seat and started the season as planned. His performance on track was disastrous. Teammate Mick Schumacher out-qualified him 21 times in 22 races. Mazepin crashed regularly and often took out other drivers with reckless moves. His best finish was 14th place in a field of 20 cars. He scored 0 points and was consistently the slowest driver on the grid. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, everything changed overnight. Haas stripped all Uralkali branding from their cars during preseason testing. They painted over the Russian flag colors and replaced them with plain white livery. Within 48 hours, Mazepin was fired and his father's sponsorship contract was terminated. The case showed F1 teams were willing to accept money from questionable sources. Teams knew about the Mazepin family's connections, but took the funding anyway. Mika Häkkinen's near-death experience. The 1995 Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide nearly ended Mika Häkkinen's life. During the race, his left rear tire exploded at 190 miles per hour on the main straight. The McLaren spun backward and hit the tire barrier at turn 6 with tremendous force. The impact knocked Häkkinen unconscious immediately. When paramedics reached his car, he wasn't breathing. His airway was blocked by blood and debris from the crash. Dr. Sid Watkins, F1's chief medical officer, had to perform an emergency tracheotomy at the crash site. Watkins cut a hole in Häkkinen's throat and inserted a breathing tube to get oxygen to his lungs. It was a desperate procedure performed with basic medical equipment on the side of a racetrack. Without it, Häkkinen would have died within minutes. He was airlifted to a hospital in Adelaide where doctors discovered his skull was fractured in multiple places. His brain was swollen and bleeding from the impact. Emergency surgery was required to relieve the pressure and prevent further damage. Hakkinen spent 6 days in a medically induced coma. When he woke up, he couldn't speak properly because of the tracheotomy. He had to relearn basic motor skills such as walking and writing. His balance was impaired and his vision was blurry from the brain injury. McLaren kept Hakkinen's seat open for 1996 while he recovered from his injuries. He returned in 1997 and won world championships in 1998 and 1999. Friends said he became more anxious and withdrawn. After retiring in 2001, Hakkinen said he had post-traumatic stress disorder from the Adelaide crash. He had panic attacks during races but did not tell his team. He used alcohol to manage anxiety, which caused more problems. Hans Heier's unauthorized race. Hans Heier failed to qualify for the 1977 German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. His Penske Ford was simply too slow to make the 26-car grid. As a German driver at his home race, he was devastated. Thousands of fans had come specifically to watch him compete. Instead of accepting defeat, Heier decided to race anyway. When the formation lap began, he drove his car out of the garage and joined the back of the field. Race officials noticed an extra car but assumed it was a late qualifier who had been cleared to start. Heier took the green flag and began racing illegally. For 10 laps, he held his own against the qualified drivers. He was actually running in 12th place and scoring points when his gearbox failed. Only when he retired did officials realize what had happened. The FIA was furious. They disqualified Heier from a race he had never been qualified for in the first place. He became the only driver in F1 history to simultaneously DNQ, or did not qualify, DNS, did not start, DNF, did not finish, and DSQ, disqualified, from the same Grand Prix. Heier received a lifetime ban from all FIA-sanctioned motorsports. His professional racing career was over. But he didn't regret his actions. In interviews afterward, he said, "At least I was a Formula One driver for 10 laps. That's more than most people can say." The case demonstrated the disorganization of F1 operations in the 1970s. Security was minimal and officials did not track which cars were on the track. A driver could join a Grand Prix without being noticed for several laps. Tom Price and the Fire Marshal. The 1977 South African Grand Prix at Kyalami produced one of the most horrific accidents in motorsports history. During the race, Renzo Zorzi's Shadow DNA caught fire on the main straight and pulled over to the side of the track. Two marshals, Frederik Janssen van Vuren and Bill Wambach, ran across the 6-lane track carrying fire extinguishers to help put out the blaze. They didn't wait for a caution period or coordinate with race control. They just ran directly into traffic. Tom Price was approaching at 170 miles per hour in his Shadow DN8 when he saw the marshals crossing the track. Van Vuren was carrying a 40-pound fire extinguisher and was directly in Price's path. There was no time to brake or swerve. The impact killed Van Vuren instantly and launched his body over the catch fencing into the spectator area. But the fire extinguisher he was carrying flew upward and struck Price in the head. Collision partially decapitated the Welsh driver and killed him immediately. Price's car kept going down the track at full speed with his body over the steering wheel. It went another 600 yards before hitting the barrier at the next corner. At first, spectators thought it was a normal crash until they saw blood from the cockpit. Race officials decided to continue the session for another 50 laps rather than deal with the carnage in front of television cameras. The safety car wasn't deployed and no caution period was called. Other drivers had to navigate around the accident scene while racing for position. Both men were 27 years old. Van Vuren was a part-time volunteer who worked at races to be close to the sport he loved. Price was considered one of Britain's most promising drivers and had scored his first podium finish just 2 races earlier. Ronnie Peterson's fatal surgery. At the start of the 1978 Italian Grand Prix, 10 cars crashed in a massive pileup at the first chicane at Monza. Ronnie Peterson's Lotus 78 was hit from behind by another car and immediately burst into flames when the fuel tank ruptured. Peterson was trapped in the burning cockpit as gasoline spread around his legs and lower body. Other drivers stopped their cars and ran back to help. Clay Regazzoni and Patrick DePaler pulled him from the wreckage while fuel continued to burn around them. Peterson's legs were badly fractured and burned. His left leg was almost severed at the ankle. He was conscious and talking when paramedics took him to the ambulance. The emergency surgery in Milan took 8 hours. Doctors used metal pins and plates to rebuild his shattered bones. They performed skin grafts to treat the severe burns on his legs and back. Initially, the operation appeared successful, and Peterson was listed in stable condition. Fat embolisms from his broken bones entered his bloodstream during surgery. These blocked blood vessels in his lungs and brain. Peterson had a heart attack overnight and died the next morning. Mario Andretti won the world championship that year, but he refused to celebrate. Peterson had been his teammate at Lotus and one of his closest friends in the racing world. Andretti said later, "That title will always be tainted by Ronnie's death. I would gladly trade it to have him back." Jochen Rindt's safety belt decision. Jochen Rindt made a fatal decision about safety equipment that cost him his life. The Austrian driver refused to wear shoulder harnesses in his Lotus 72 because he found them uncomfortable and restrictive. He used only a lap belt around his waist, which was legal but dangerous. During practice for the 1970 Italian Grand Prix at Monza, Rindt's car had a front wing failure at 140 miles per hour. The Lotus spun backward into the Armco barrier. With proper shoulder restraints, he might have survived. The lap belt let his upper body move forward in the crash. The deceleration caused fatal injuries. He was thrown partly from the cockpit and died at age 28. Rindt was leading the world championship by 20 points with 4 races remaining. His main rival, Jackie Ickx, needed to win multiple races to catch up in the standings. But Ickx's Ferrari suffered mechanical problems in Canada and he crashed in the United States. Rindt became the first and only posthumous Formula One world champion. His widow, Nina, accepted the trophy at the FIA awards ceremony while pregnant with their second child. She broke down crying during the presentation. The championship showed F1 safety problems. Rindt was the 5th driver killed in 2 years. Many drivers prioritized comfort and mobility over safety equipment. It took more deaths before proper restraints became required. The Imola Weekend of Death. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix weekend at Imola was the darkest in F1 history. It started badly during Friday practice when Rubens Barrichello's Jordan launched over a curb at Variante Bassa and flipped upside down. He was knocked unconscious and hospitalized with a broken nose and bruised lungs. Saturday brought worse news. During qualifying, Roland Ratzenberger's Simtek hit the wall at Villeneuve Corner when his front wing failed. The Austrian driver was killed instantly, becoming F1's first fatality since Elio De Angelis in 1986. The paddock was shaken, but the weekend continued. Sunday's race began with another accident. At the start, J.J. Leto's Benetton stalled on the grid and was hit from behind by Pedro Lami's Lotus. Debris flew into the grandstands, injuring several spectators. The race was red flagged and restarted an hour later. On lap 7 of the restart, Ayrton Senna's Williams went straight on at Tambureo Corner and hit the concrete wall at 145 miles per hour. A suspension arm pierced his helmet, causing fatal head injuries. The 3-time world champion was airlifted to a hospital at Bologna, where he was pronounced dead. The weekend saw 1 driver killed in qualifying, another killed in the race, 1 driver hospitalized, and several spectators injured. It forced F1 to address its safety problems after years of inaction. Within months, new regulations were introduced covering everything from car design to track safety. The cockpit sides were raised, the cars were slowed down with smaller engines, and concrete barriers were replaced with safer alternatives. It took 2 deaths in 2 days to finally change F1's attitude towards safety.